Do not approach a woman to have sexual relations during the uncleanness of her monthly period. Do not have sexual relations with your neighbor's wife and defile yourself with her. Do not give any of your children to be sacrificed to Molech. Do not have sexual relations with a man as one does with a woman. That is detestable. Do not have sexual relations with an animal and defile yourself with it. A woman must not present herself to an animal to have sexual relations with it. This is a perversion. Do not defile yourselves in any of these ways, because this is how the nations that I am going to drive out before you became defiled.
Divine Quarantine, Jesus is Lord, and he's coming back. Me and Dr. Josh actually agree on something for once. Wow. No. Um, the entire video, he goes on to say why this isn't the case, why this interpretation, he calls it, isn't true. And I'm going to debunk that today, Lord willing, rebuke and reprove that argument that he, or counter argument, you can call it. But Jesus is Lord, and he's coming back. And we want to talk about Numbers. We're going to talk about Numbers 31 today. Numbers 31, one of the uh, favorite passages for the skeptic to pick on, if you will. So Divine Quarantine and Numbers 31. I'm going to let Dr. Josh continue to give the argument. I don't know if this was in response to me a couple of years ago when I did a video on Divine Quarantine in Numbers 31 or not, but um, I'm not the only one, I guess, that has this approach, that takes this approach, Divine Quarantine, Numbers 31. I'm going to let you hear Dr. Josh's counter argument, and then I'm going to debunk it really, really easily. He's missing something fundamentally when it comes to Christianity and the Christian faith and divine punishments, if you will.
Setting aside the difficulties in the passage with its editorial and transmissional history, as well as how the phrase translated here, sacrifice to Molech, should be understood, what we see is that the inhabitants of the land have practiced, according to the writer, the aforementioned acts, including homosexuality and bestiality. Based on this passage, it is argued that the Midianites practiced these behaviors, which had led to a plague that broke out among the nation. Thus, in Numbers 25, when the Israelites began to have sexual relations with the Midianite women, the plague infected the Israelites, leading to the death of 24,000 people. This explains why the deaths of the men in Numbers 31 was not sufficient. Even the boys and non-virgin women must be killed, as they would have been infected as well. Only the virgin girls would have been spared, as they would not have engaged in these practices, and thus would have been clean. In short, God was very gracious in eliminating the Midianites through this divine quarantine, as it stopped the spread of a lethal plague in the ancient Near East.
That's the argument, sort of, I guess, but close enough, yeah. And I'm going to let you hear Dr. Josh's response. Of course, he doesn't agree with my argument, but that is sort of the gist of the argument. Divine quarantine is what I would consider Numbers 31. Dr. Josh says it was a divine punishment. Well, what's the difference? Context is king. Context is king. There's a few things I wanted to give you to bring some context to the story. The first thing, this war, the entire war against the ites, if you will, the Canaanites, the Jebusites, the Hittites, etc. This war was waged not based on their race. It was not a racially motivated war or an ethnic cleansing, as Wildheart likes to say over and over again. Never actually demonstrating such from the text, but he just likes to say it. Makes him feel comfortable. Makes him feel as though he'll have an excuse on Judgment Day, I guess. But God did not order or did not judge the Midianites because of their ethnicity. He didn't judge the Jews or the Jewish people because of their ethnicity, but on account of their sins. And if you're going to read Numbers 31, I would suggest you read Numbers 25. If you haven't read Numbers 25, then you have no business trying to interpret Numbers 31. Keep alive for you all of the virgins, keep them for yourselves. Well, at first glance, this may seem as though if you're a pervert, you may read into the text um, some perversion, I guess projecting your thoughts onto the Israelite people. Um, it may seem as though the young girls are being spared for selfish gain, for sex slavery, or for some sort of exploitative means or measures that were taken against these women or up against these women um, at first glance. Because if you're an atheist and you hate the God of the Bible, you're not going to give the Israelite people the benefit of the doubt. You're not going to give the people of God the benefit of the doubt. You're going to always look at the glass as half empty because you hate the God of the Bible. But if it were your family or your friends, you would say, well, maybe something else might be going on here. Let me try to get some more information, some context, so that I can judge appropriately. But not when it comes to people who you hate, and not when it comes to the God of the Bible who you hate. You won't look for those details of those contexts. You will come to a presumption, a presumptuous decision or judgment based off of surface level or superficial or small amount of information, and not even listen to what the context is. That's because you hate the God of the Bible, and therefore you hate His people. And the people of God, we know in the Old Testament, were the Israelites. So, at first glance, you're going to say, "This is sex slavery. Carnivorous ape, sex slavery, right there. It says it right there." But the preposition here, "for," is not necessarily used in a possessive sense, according to scholars. It simply can be understood as instruction to keep the young girls in the Israelite camp. They're staying with us, they're going to travel with us. It doesn't denote any sort of exploitative means or measure that was taken upon them. They probably would have been married off to the young boys in the camp eventually. Children would have been married off to the young boys. Okay. And lastly, Deuteronomy 21 and Deuteronomy 27 specifically addresses women taken as prisoners of war, we can call them. Even though we know the Israelites did one better than our Geneva Convention. It said, we're not going to take you as a prisoner of war. We're going to take you in our household, adopt you as one of the family members, as a servant. Okay, which is a lot better than a prisoner of war, in my opinion. Um, so the specific, it was called adoption through manumission. Okay, specifically addresses these passages, women taken as prisoners of war, and the procedures protecting them from being used as sex objects. All right, so the goal was not to pillage. The goal was to protect them, was to include them as part of the Israelite nation, and that's how you grew. In ancient times, when you conquered another land, you would take the women and children as booty. Okay, now you would, and that's how your nation grew. All right. And the women and the children, of course, would have been glad to come now that everything that they knew was destroyed because of the battle. By the way, the fact that the atheist has to go to passages of war like Deuteronomy 20 already means they lost the debate if they're looking for uh, looking to leverage these incidents against the God of the Bible. God is supposed to be a good God. So let me point to when God says to go to war and kill people to demonstrate that God's not a good person. Yeah, that works. War is necessary. War is sometimes necessary. I think we all know that. Living in this world for 30, 40 years, we all know that war sometimes is necessary. And war is ugly. So when you have to point to these issues or these incidents as your evidence, it probably means you don't have much evidence that the God of the Bible is this maniacal, genocidal maniac that you want to paint him out to be. So Numbers 31 returns to an issue raised in Numbers or chapter 25, which is the incident of Peor. And in this incident, the God of the Bible commands Moses to destroy them, to strike them down, harass them, because of their harassment of the Israelite people when they were a small migrant group, which the text says, beguiled you in the matter of Peor. So any attempt to understand Numbers 31 again will necessarily involve understanding what happened in Numbers 25, along with other passages. All right. So first, the sin that Israel committed was treasonous, treachery, an abomination against their good God. The incident at Peor was what some people could call a high-handed sin, meaning you're robbing the bank in broad daylight, or like some of my associates would say when I was growing up, barefaced it. Barefaced it. Okay, that means you're not wearing a mask. So it was a high-handed sin. It was an open affront to the God of the Bible. It was not accidental. Oops, I'm sorry. I fell into that Midianite woman. I'm sorry. No, it was an open, flagrant rebellion against God. Um, as we see in the story when we read about um, the act of Zimri, who took a Midianite woman, to his bed. He just was, I'm just gonna, I'm just gonna bring this prostitute. Now she wasn't a prostitute, but I'm just gonna bring her into church and kiss her in front of the congregation. This was the act of Zimri, to openly take a Midianite woman, knowing the practices. We'll get into some of their practices of their religion. Dr. Josh seems to think God is judging the Israelites for worshiping another God. Yeah, well, what did that worship of another God include? That's the part that this liberal scholar wants to leave out. Okay. So we are told that the men actively sinned. It was an high handed sin. And then they tried to get the other Israelites to follow in the same direction. So this was not an innocent mistake, but a deliberate attempt to undermine the God of the Bible and to get others to do the same. We also have to realize that this is a terrible thing that happened. This is a tragedy. What happened at Peor was a tragedy, that so many people had decided to disobey God and do what they wanted to do when it came to sexuality. Okay, so we see in these passages the gravity of sin and how um, this should sober us and warn us that we need to stay clear of sin. That sin is something that God does take seriously. You may not take it seriously because you're an atheist, but the God of the Bible does take it seriously, and the consequences of sin follow like night follows day. Why did God kill the animals? Now, here's another context that Dr. Josh didn't even mention in his 16-minute response to the divine genocide theory or interpretation, he calls it. He didn't mention the animals. Why don't atheists mention the animals? Well, because it lends credence to the argument that there is a response to biologically, there is a biological response to sin. Not everything, as Dr. Josh tries to argue, that God does as far as punishment, divine punishment, is a magical abracadabra. You now have moly skin, or you now have boils. Now that was the case with Job. Job was perfectly healthy. He wasn't smoking 4 packs of Marlboros a day. Um, but when we say that God is divinely punishing a group of people or a behavior, really, not a group of people, because that would be racist, but a behavior that a group of people is practicing, it doesn't necessarily have to be abracadabra, poof, you all have AIDS. But there could be a natural response to the unnatural act. There can be an or a natural response to an unnatural react or action. So if I do something that is unnatural to my body, to whereby my body is saying, why are you destroying all my T cells? What is going on? Why do you keep pumping me with all of these boosters? Booster, booster. And my body now is trying to react against the unnatural reaction. Things happen in the body to whereby diseases and viruses or bacteria and things, the natural body responds to an unnatural behavior. Okay, it affects your immune system. There are systems in the body that can be affected by behaviors. So everything that God does when he judges a nation or he judges a behavior, it doesn't necessarily have to be him zapping you and all of a sudden you have AIDS now. God doesn't need to throw me off of a roof for me to break my neck. I can throw myself off a roof, and that is the punishment for not obeying God when he said you're not created to fly. That's the punishment you get. So if there's a natural punishment, God can send some of the miracles in the Bible are miracles of timing. Did you know that? They just so happen to be in the right place at the right time when the event or the natural disaster occurred and wiped them all out. That's all part of God's providence and his planning, which we believe that it was done before the foundations of the earth. But Dr. Josh wants to argue that this was a divine punishment. You darn right it was. When you have intercourse with animals, there are divine punishments already built in naturally, but they're still divine. They're still divine because God created us in a way that we should function, and then he provides us with precepts and laws to teach us how we should live according to how he created us. So, one of the questions that we avoid, that liberals will avoid, is why did God kill the animals? Well, the reason why God killed the animals is because the diseases were also spreading through the animals. How do I know this? Because the same diseases occur when these unnatural acts happen today. It's called zoophilia or zoophilia. So the animals had to be destroyed because they too were infected by the plague. In fact, the plague may have came from the animals. because of the unnatural behaviors, we call it bestiality, that they were engaging in, which was a part of their religion, Dr. Josh. So it wasn't that God was not a fan of freedom of religion, or the First or Second Amendment, I think, First Amendment. It wasn't that God is not a fan of freedom of religion. It's that he's not a fan of religions that include as part of their rituals sex with animals, homosexuality. You saw Dr. Josh give the list. He's not a fan of religions that involve that type of behavior. And now, if you're in a false religion like the Jehovah Witnesses, and you're not doing any of these things, then he'll just send an apologist or he'll send a prophet. He's not going to destroy you because you believe in Russell, or whatever his name is, Charles Taze Russell, and what he taught. You were taught that when you were growing up, and as a result, that's what you believe as an adult. You're not wiping out 24,000 people with your teaching. You might be killing souls, like Smokey would say, but you're not causing or possibly leading or causing the extermination of the entire human population. And before penicillin, we can probably understand, I hope, why God had such an aversion to even fornication. That means sleeping with someone outside of marriage, sleeping with more than one woman. Before penicillin, look at all these things that can happen to you. Matter of fact, some of these diseases are coming from people sleeping with their animals. And I don't mean sex. You're not supposed to be sleeping with your dog. My wife said that that's what she said that's what white people do. I know. All right, that's racist. You can't, Mrs. Joe. You can't say that. You know that's you you know that's racist.
That's racist! That's racist! That's racist!
All right. So these are many and there's more, by the way. Um, you can Google these conditions that can happen. Where do these diseases come from? Unnatural behaviors. Men sleeping with men is an unnatural behavior. The sperm cell is wondering what is going on as he's swimming through an anal canal. He's saying, where am I? This is not natural. I'm in the wrong place. Literally, he's swimming around looking for the egg. He knows, the sperm cell knows that he is in the wrong place. This isn't natural. Get me the heck out of here. So when you have all of these conditions that occur, they're naturally built in as a divine punishment, Dr. Josh. So we don't need them to say, we don't need to see lightning come down out of heaven and hit the gay person and now he has AIDS. That's not how God has worked over the millennials, right? He's not worked in that manner. When he parts the Red Sea, scientists have discovered that sea actually parts every year during a certain time of the year. So that could have been a miracle of timing. God can use natural means to punish us. He can use natural means to punish us. I like this argument.
And where Singer again would lead you to believe that Moses is going, hey, you guys, keep the virgins for yourselves that you might really enjoy them. No, it was because the women of the ancient Near East they wore adornments that signified their virginity, and in this case, it signified that they should be spared because they weren't guilty of participating in the sexual immorality. That 6 chapters previously, in Numbers chapter 25, it records an incident of something that happened at Baal Peor that gives context of this, which is very important. These women had seduced the men of Israel away from the worship of God and into the barbaric satanic rituals that included sexual immorality and human sacrifice. This was what they had done. Their very presence among the people of Israel was a national security risk.
A national security risk. I like that better. That's a little bit more contemporary, right? Than divine punishment. Divine punishment or quarantine almost sounds, you know, 1980s. But a national security risk. Yes, these behaviors were a national security risk. Again, before the advent of penicillin, you could die from a bacterial infection. Well, why wouldn't God then, in his wisdom, before AIDS, we had other STDs like gonorrhea, syphilis, herpes, chlamydia. These are, politically correct leftist liberals will call them social or social diseases. Were raging around the world for centuries before AIDS. But why wouldn't God, in his wisdom, say no fornication and set Israel up as the template, if you will, or the guide or the light until the rest of the nations, that the rest of the nations should follow? Medical establishment actually promotes promiscuity and immorality rather than teach children about or to abstain from premarital sex. They provide sex education, condoms. Condoms aren't 100% effective, by the way, and birth control pills to children. The majority of health professions, even though they can't prove that, you'll never even hear them state that it's natural, normal, or healthy. The majority of health professionals say that it's not wrong. They're giving you your opinion, not based in any science. Um, and that, it's safe. Homosexual quote unquote sex is safe even. Well, God says no. God will punish you for sin, and that person might get a fatal disease, and God will allow the disease to destroy them. So again, Dr. Johnson, when we say divine quarantine or divine punishment, we don't necessarily mean that there isn't a biological factor involved, or that God can't use biological factors, um, dietary laws. That's God's punishment. Obesity is God's punishment, divine punishment for gluttony. It's a built in, if you will, divine punishment for gluttony. God didn't just strike, you decided to eat that extra apple pie and 35 pounds onto your waist by the next morning. That's not how God operates. Allow God to operate in the time and the space that he created. It's like suggesting God has always got to operate in the supernatural sense. He can't use any of his creation to judge his creation. That seems to be the assumption. Except for what I mentioned, the medical establishment, not the Muslim countries. The Muslim countries are okay. They reject these unnatural behavioral changes. Um, so not the Muslim countries. So they're okay. Believe it or not, they're okay with this when it comes to God. They're not okay with Muhammad. So they're going to be judged for Muhammad, and following after a pervert. Um, like AIDS, all of these diseases are spread by sexual contact. That's how most 87% of diseases. That's why God killed the animals, by the way. Poor little dog. Poor little baby. All right. 97%. Excuse me, 87%. It's according to the CDC, by the way. 87% of all reportable diseases are sexually transmitted. 87%. Yet God is capricious? No. God is never capricious. He just doesn't make up these laws because God doesn't like people having sex. God enjoys sex. He enjoys people having sex. Now, I'm not saying God is some pervert watching, um, but he enjoys his creation. What did he say in the beginning? Be fruitful and multiply. You guys need to repent of children said God was watching me and my wife. You need to repent, Dr. Kenny. You need to repent. All right. So, but 87% of these diseases are preventable. Why wouldn't a good God say you shall not commit adultery, which includes all forms of sexual immorality, by the way? The word is porneia, where we get the root word, uh, where we get the word porn from. Committing adultery or sexual immorality, porneia, that includes all forms of sex outside of a marriage between a man and a woman. We could literally eliminate 90, I would say 95% of all diseases by changing sexual behavior to conform to the standards of God's law. Imagine the health, the joy, the peace that we would all experience had we not listened to Ruth Bader Ginsburg and the liberals. Had we not listened to Harvey Milk. Here's some more diseases that can be transmitted through sexual contact with animals, which is what these people were doing in the ancient Near East. And then God says, enough. Take all the leaders. Numbers 25, verse 4. Take all the leaders of these people, kill them. Notice how he's taking the leaders and exposing them and making an example out of them. Not necessarily all of the people who they convinced to do these things. Take all of them, all of the leaders, all of the ones who promote homosexuality, and kill them. These are the ones who followed Baal or Balaam's advice and caused the people of Israel to rebel against the Lord at Mount Peor. They're the ones who caused the plague to strike the Lord's people. Again, does the plague being divine mean that there isn't a natural component, as Dr. Josh assumes? No. Divine punishment can be natural, can be ushered in the world in a natural sense. Okay, not necessarily a supernatural one. I asked Alexa a question the other day.
Alexa, when will World War III start?
World War III starts on November 23, 2023 at 6:05 p.m., when Russia launches an attack against Germany.
Uh-oh. All right, so these are the ones who Alexa knows. That's your God, right? Speaking of female gods, okay, let me introduce you to another one. Remember the God of the Bible is just wiping out these ancient practices, which thank God do not exist today, at least as it did back then. Okay, he's wiping out the ites. Right? Do a study on the ites and what they mean, what their names mean. You find like the Hittites, for example. That word literally means terrible or fearsome. Hittite. The name Hittite means terrible or fearsome. Their empire was probably north of Israel, but many of these camps were spread out because these were nomadic tribal groups. So you could find a Hittite camp, even south or west of Israel. But the famous Hittites were north of Israel, and um, they were the sons of Heth. That's where the name Hittite comes from. It uh, literally means terrible, terrible, and they were, for the most part, a terror. You think ISIS is bad? You think Boko Haram is bad? Where do you get a load to the Hittites, to the Amorites? Where do you get a load of them? Numbers 31 is not normative. It's non normative, meaning this isn't normally what God would do or what any nation would do if they were to go into war with another, with the remains or the spoils of war. Normally, the spoils of war are taken and used to make supplies, food, clothing for the survivors of the war. You rarely take animals that can be used for food and burn them, destroy them, when your army probably needs that food to survive, so before they go on to the next camp or attack the next city. So typically, normally in war, even in the scriptures, the spoils are kept. But this time, God decides you cannot keep the spoils. Why? Because the spoils were spoiled. The spoils were spoiled. So God had to destroy even the animals. So ask that question the next time you have this conversation with Numbers 31. They're going to try to avoid the fact that the animals were killed, or they're going to call PETA and try to get the Israelites arrested from 5,000 years ago, killing those animals, those poor animals. Ask them why the animals were killed. The animals were killed because the spoils had been spoiled. Divine quarantine, not divine genocide. When you lay siege to a city for a long time, fighting against it to capture it, do not destroy its trees and put an axe to them because you can eat their fruit. Do not cut them down. Keep the spoils and the animals and take the animals with them and use them for food and clothing. All right, so this is Colonel Robert Miller, and he sums it up like this when it comes to quarantine. Although civil liberties were some of those people's that were their civil liberties taken during this war or this quarantine, yes, many of them lost their lives. Would we kill a group of people if we had to quarantine? Probably not, because we have the capabilities of doing what we call blockades and keeping everyone in. If someone tries to leave, depends. It could be ordered to dot to shoot, depending on the disease. From what I'm told, you could be ordered an arm. You could be ordered to kill someone, depending on the disease. If the bubonic came back and we contained it in one village, no one is leaving that village. No one is leaving that village. Okay, no one is leaving that village. If you try to leave, well, you know what's going to happen to you. You know what's going to happen to you. There, some people in hazmat suits are going to come out running at you and try to take you back in, probably. Um, but let's say you're out of range and you're about to, hop on a boat or something, and you might get shot. You might get shot. Okay, because the idea is to contain the quarantine, to contain the disease. All right, that's more important than your feelings. Although civil liberties may be impacted with quarantine, these actions are justified, giving the potential ramifications of a deadly biological attack. Surveillance, infection control, isolation, and most importantly, quarantine to continue or to control a disease outbreak with will be the key to success. And the Air Force has much to learn involving the successful implementation of quarantine, given the broad impact of this strategy. We must never forget the harsh lessons from the past epidemics, no matter how painful the memories may be. So that was Colonel Robert Miller of the United States Air Force. There, um, Slim Jim says we don't. The secularism is poor excuse for true religion. We don't keep spoils of war anymore. That's a lie. It's a lie from the pit of hell. You could argue, I guess World War II we stopped really the last war, World War, a major war, World War II. We stopped doing it. The reparations has to be paid, and the loser of the war pays reparations. Okay, if you were Germany, it was to the tune of after World War One, I think, 30 billion dollars. Those are the spoils of war. So no, you don't have to take the China, you don't have to take the gold, like your church did, the gold statues. You don't have to loot in that sense um, to pay spoils or to take spoils. It's more sophisticated. It's more dealing with governments and not necessarily the people, or the villagers, or the groups, or locals, you might call them. But there is still spoils of war, though, although be it more sophisticated. Okay, so divine quarantine. I want to read some more passages of scripture coming from. This is Numbers 31, I believe. When the Israelites were camped at Acacia Grove, some of the men defiled themselves by having sexual relations with local Moabite women. They couldn't stay away from the Moabite women. There was something about the Moabite women. One even brought one to the camp. He brought one back to the camp. You see, she was that bad, huh? You brought her back to the camp. You knew she wasn't supposed to be bringing no Moabite women, and she must have been uh, that beautiful. I don't know, but that sexy. I don't know. He brought her back to the camp, and well, we know what happened. We read the story, right? These women invited them to attend sacrifices to their gods. Let's talk about that for a moment. Sacrifices to their gods. What did that include, Dr. Josh? What did that include? Did that include them holding hands, singing Kumbaya, my Lord, my Baal, Kumbaya, my Baal, Kumbaya, oh Baal? Historians um, suggest that the worship of Baal included the wearing of dreadlocks and um, during their chanting, they would chant "Oh Baal," sort of like how the Buddhists do today, "Oh Baal," and they would cut themselves with rocks, sort of like the Muslims do today. Some of the Muslim groups, they would cut themselves with rocks, and uh, they would roll their heads around their necks, and "Oh Baal." And they would swing their dreadlocks back and forth, oh bail, cut themselves with the rock, and um, sacrifice their children unto Molech. There was another group we can read in Kings. These groups worshiped a female god. Her name was Ashra. Many of the religions that God was trying to wipe out were sex fertility cults or religions. So you can call them, Dr. Josh, sex fertility cults, because that's what you would have called it had a group of so-called Christians did the same today. You would be quick, you and your liberal comrades will be quick to label them as a sex fertility cult. But when you read about these groups in the Bible, well, it was just because they were another religion. Just another religion. No, Astra worship became the basis for religious prostitution, Dr. Josh. Read 1 Kings chapter 14. It became the basis for religious prostitution. Astra was worshipped near trees and poles. They were called Ashra poles. So women were putting poles in their living rooms, in their bedrooms, and in their kitchens back then, before the liberals started doing it today. There's nothing new under the sun. Okay, it was. You can read about this in Deuteronomy 7, Deuteronomy 12, Kings chapter 16, of course, then even in Jeremiah and Ezekiel. So they were pole dancing. Liberals were pole dancing back then, teaching their daughters how to pole dance and making movies about it and calling it cuties. By the way, they're up for indictment for child pornography. Jefferson Spatchcock, who seemed to think that this was just some sort of artistic expression. So those who follow Baal's advice will perish. That's what we need to take from this passage. That's what we need to learn from these texts. That these behaviors are an offense to God because they are an offense to our nature. To our nature. And when you offend your nature, you offend God. When you offend and you spit on God's creation and basically say, I'm programmed a biological program, wet biological robots. I'm programmed to do this, but no, I am going to decide to fly, and I'm going to try to genetically modify my body so that I can grow wings. If you were to die of a disease, an autoimmune deficiency disease, that's God's divine punishment against you and against all of those who practice that behavior. It's a divine punishment that's built into our biological makeup, but still a divine punishment. Could God stop it? Could he have mercy? Yes. So God is still sovereign. He's still in control, because if you're doing these things and he has mercy on you, he may not allow the virus. He may stop the virus. Right? Remember, 87% of all diseases are preventable. They are preventable. If we would only listen to God's word and not the word of the left or the liberal, or what's called Western liberalism. Sounds like Jill would rather regress, go back to not allowing women to vote separate but equal. I want to go back to when women didn't want to vote. Bum, 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 bum. Some women, like my wife, doesn't want to vote. She said the men are supposed to vote. That's where I want to go back. So just like in the ancient Near East, we can look at the culture of the women And when it came to marriage and when it came to servitude, women would have been fighting each other to get to the doorstep or to get to the foot of a man like Boaz. They would have they would even it's still depicted today in the fantasy cartoons, right? Whatever you want to call it, the uh, the cartoons about the prince and the princess and the what do we call those things? What do we call those types of cartoons? You know what I'm talking about. The Disney cartoons, where women would literally 10, 15, 20, there would be a ball. The prince would come to the ball, and all the women would. This story is even in the book of Ezra, or the same scenario. All the women would dress up and put on their makeup. Why? Because they wanted to be accepted by the prince, a part, or at least be part of his organization, or whatever you want to call it, right? So the attitude of the women is what changed. Okay, that's what changed. The feminized, the feminist movement, the feminazi movement, um, where women didn't, some women, most women didn't want to be or have that responsibility. That might have been too much responsibility. She's got the kids and the home to take care of. Why does she need to worry about politics? Let the man handle that. Let that burden be on the man. Let the woman have less burdens. That's the biblical model. Your model is, let's put her out on the forefront. Let's put her in the army. Let's put her in front of the drug house and have her kick down the door and arrest Tyrone. Well, how's that working out for you? How's that working out for you? Speaking of Tyrone, you better call Tyrone. Call him.
Come here real quick. Yeah. Are you having beef with someone up the road?
All right, so are you having beef with someone up the road? Now, this guy, his mom was probably worshiping on a pole, Asherah on a pole, and that's why he's behaving in this fashion. But there's no father. Okay. Um, so someone called 911. Now, we complain about police officers and how they so frequently traffic the black community. It's because people in the black community are calling 911. That's why the police officers are there. If no one was calling 911, they wouldn't show up. They don't want to be here. No one wants to go to a place where their life can be lost in an instant just because. Just caprice. Oh, I'm just going to go to the hood. I don't go to the hood unless I have to. And I never have to anymore. Thank God. These guys are called to the hood to deal with Tyrone because you can't deal with him, mom, because there's no dad in the home. So he punches you in the mouth and you call 911 and now the police are here. So he got into some beef or some argument with another thug in the street and brandished a gun. I don't understand this officer. If he knows this guy has a gun, I'm not approaching him, but I don't know. Maybe he's not from the hood. What are they doing in the police academy? Why is this? Watch his stance. Check out his stance. If he were on, if the officer were on the opposite side, he might see the gun bulging out his sweatpants.
Hey, hold on. Hey, he's broke, bro. Yeah. Okay, hold on.
Look at this. Look how he's standing. Look how he's standing, facing sideways, as if he's hiding something on his right side. That's what it looks like.
Stop. Stop. What's going on? Keep your hands out of your pocket. You got any weapons or anything? What's going on with them?
Or why? I don't understand this officer. Slim Jim, come help me figure this out. Look at his stance. Look at his stance. He's standing like he's about to draw, and the officer's coming closer and closer. Look at his stance. Look at him. I'm not approaching this dude.
Keep your hands out of your pocket.
Get your hands out of your pocket. That's all you can talk. Look how he's standing. He's standing like he's about to draw. Come on, man. You don't have. I guess I don't.
Weapons or anything? What's going on with them?
I don't know. He drunk, bro. I'm trying to walk.
Hold on, man.
I'm young in the mud.
Well, let me figure out what's going on.
Like
I'll
20
get...
years old.
You got any weapons? Can I pat you down real quick? Make sure you don't have any weapons.
Look at it. Look how he's standing. Who stands like that? Speaking of Tyrone, who stands like that? Officer? What? I mean, I don't mean to be critical. I know there's a lot of it's a stressful job. I can't be critical, but I mean, I know this guy has a gun. This is by the way he's standing.
Here, don't reach for nothing. Oh! Shots fired! Shots fired! I'm hit!
And the slaying of all the people except for the virgin women, some have sought to explain this as a type of divine quarantine, where God is containing a plague that had broken out among the Midianites because of their sexual misconduct, which
Yeah, that would be correct. That would be correct, Dr. Josh. Because of their sexual conduct, which is why the virgins were spared, because they had not participated in any sexual rituals. If it were just a matter, Dr. Josh, of destroying these people because of their religion, then why not the women who were also part of the religion but just didn't take part in the rituals? Because it had nothing to do with their religion. Well, everything to do with their religion, but not the religion, not the fact that they were religious, but the fact that their religious practices included sexual contact with children, men having sex with men, as you pointed out in Leviticus 18 and 19, and men and sexual contact with animals, prostitution, swinging around the pole of Astra. Okay, so this isn't just an attack on someone's or another culture's religion. If your religion is an attack on humanity, then it should be destroyed.
was seen in chapter 25. This resulted in their necessary annihilation because diseases spread, but explains saving the virgin women who would not have been infected by the plague. This, it is argued, not only negates the idea of God commanding anything immoral, but actually brings a desirable result, not only for the Israelites, but for the virgin women, who would not have been infected by the plague. Of course, there are numerous problems with this interpretation of the text. In this video, I will seek to place Numbers 31 in its literary context.
All right, so he's going to place Numbers 31 in its literary context, which does nothing to defeat the argument. Has nothing to do with the literary context, literally.
Demonstrating that the plague was of divine origin.
Okay, so he's going to demonstrate, he's going to put it in its literary, let me rewind that.
The plague was of divine origin. And place Numbers 31 in its literary context.
He's going to place Numbers 1 in its literary context. Why is that relevant? It's literary context, I guess. Are you going to demonstrate that it's saying something that we're saying, or that it's not, or we're saying that it's not saying, or I don't know. But he's going to put it in this literary context. This is one of those things where you just say something to make you sound like you know what you're talking about, but it's an irrelevant factoid.
demonstrating that the plague was of divine origin.
Okay, he's going to demonstrate that the plague was of divine origin. This is a nothing burger, Dr. Josh. We already believe that the plague was of divine origin. Every plague is of divine origin because God allows it to happen. He also created our bodies in a way that it would react violently in some cases to certain behaviors. That is divine. We don't believe that we are evolved from some premortal soup. We believe that God created our bodies in a way that they should function. And when we go against that divine prerogative of God that has decided to create us in a certain way, his decision, his prerogative, when we go against that, diseases, complications happen. That's divine. So it doesn't have to be some spook in the sky pushing a button every time you sin and then you cough. No, you're coughing because your lungs have been uh, you smoke cigars for 50 years. That's why you're coughing. You have emphysema, COPD, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, because it is that a divine is cancer divine punishment? All diseases are a result of something happening in the body that goes against the nature of the being or the body. The cancer cells are radical cells. They don't belong there. So God created us in a way in which divine punishment can happen even without God, quote unquote, lifting his hand.
And was directed against Israel, not against the Midianites. This type of
All right. Thirdly, it was directed against Israel and not against the Midianites. What? Wait a minute. Let me go back and read the text again. Numbers 31. They're the ones who followed Balaam's advice and caused the people of Israel to rebel against the Lord at Mount Peor. They're the ones who caused a plague to strike the Lord's people. Is the charge against, or is the plague against the Israelites because they're Israel? Because they're Jews? It was their behavior. The ones who followed the advice and went and slept with the Midianite women who were practicing things that were an abomination to God, bestiality. Do I have to show you all of the diseases today? Remember, this is before penicillin. There are natural consequences, not just spiritual consequences, to disobeying God, which is also a part of God's divine punishment, which is why Paul says in Romans, they received their due penalty. They received their due penalty for their unnatural affections. And God gave them up over to a reprobate mind, Paul says. So telling us that this was a divine punishment is not moving the proverbial ball forward at all, Dr. Josh. Not even an inch.
divine punishment was extraordinarily common in the Pentateuch, particularly in the book of Numbers. It was not therefore a plague that developed as a result of Midianite sexual behaviors, requiring a divine quarantine to be.
All right, so there you go. So it wasn't the result of it wasn't a result, but these are the same people that blame God for natural disasters. These are the same people that blame God for their parents getting cancer. And they'll say, well, why didn't God stop it from happening? So if God doesn't stop it from happening, it's divine. Everything that happens, we believe, is according to God's plan for the creation that he created before there was space and time. So you're not going to win that game of, well, that was not divine punishment because God said that he was going to strike you with a plague if you slept around. So, no. While the women, the Israelites were camped at Acacia Grove, some of the men defiled themselves. You can defile yourself, and you can cause a curse to come upon yourself. It's divine because God's not going to stop you. He's not going to stop the disease. Even though he could. The women, they had sexual relations with the Moabite women. Sexual relations with the Moabite women. So they just didn't sit down and worship their God. They just didn't sit down with them and drink and sip a cup of tea and read from their holy text or their holy scriptures. They were actually doing things and on a physical sense, not just spiritual, that actually caused a plague to strike the people. How much more so if we still have all of these diseases today, like AIDS in the 1980s, although we have blood samples from the 1960s that show evidence of the virus HIV, it was primarily a gay disease, which is why it used to be called GRIDS. The primary gay-related immune deficiency syndrome. The primary vehicle for these diseases is sexual contact. Sexual contact. Okay. And it's usually of an illicit nature. Two virgins getting married, man and a woman, don't seem to have these issues. So 87% of all reportable diseases are sexually transmitted, Dr. Josh. God is not mocked. He's not. Speaking of toxic masculinity,
All right.
I had Brojo, I had a question for the panel.
Question for the panel.
Yeah.
Is it about Peter?
No, it's about toxic masculinity. I was
Well,
just
what's
wondering.
that? What's that? I have no idea. I never heard this term before.
You never heard of toxic masculinity?
Yeah, we couldn't
No, I
figure it
haven't
out.
heard,
It seemed
no.
like nonsense.
Oh, okay. I was
It's a
just
myth.
I was just wondering if you guys all thought, or I'd like to hear your thoughts on this. If two men playing in each other's fecal matter, if that's considered toxic masculinity or not, unless fecal matter is biodegradable.
That's really weird, and I don't care to indulge your fetishes, but thanks anyway.
I just
want
wanted to hear
to
you guys' opinion on that.
So Jill,
I gotta run. I'll listen from the outside.
No, real quick. Are you saying being gay is very masculine? Is that what you're saying? Oh, never mind. That seems to be an implication. If it's toxic masculinity, it has to be masculinity.
You know, I really was disappointed. I thought he was going to be kind of like even half
Edgy.
serious.
Give me an edgy.
Jill's not even-handed. What if
Woke pastor of the week? Woke pastor of the week. Yeah, he went to seminary.
But I almost didn't use the book of Habakkuk today talking about Dr. King because Habakkuk has 3 Ks in it.
Pause. I almost didn't use. So he was going to preach from the book of Habakkuk. Now, one of the shortest books in the Bible, I believe. I think the shortest book in the Bible is has 2 chapters. I think that's Obadiah, or 1 chapter, um, and 21 verses. But Habakkuk, or Habakkuk, some people call it, the book of Habakkuk is one of the minor prophets in the Bible. So it's a really small book, and it has 3 K's in it. I think it's spelled Habakkuk. So he said he was going to preach from the book of Habakkuk, but it has 3 K's in it, KKK. So he, I'm for the free exchange of goods and services in a market run by the Pope. But I firmly oppose our neo-lib system, wearing free markets as a skin suit. Okay. All right. Thank you, Slim. Oh, Veckel is back. 3 K's in Habakkuk. That's why he won't preach for the KKK. This is one of the absolute dumbest things I've ever heard. Yeah. So let me let you hear it again, since it's one of the dumbest things you've ever heard, Beckel. So he won't. Now, this guy is a pastor in Salem Baptist Church of Chicago, of course, hometown of Barack Obama. Senior pastor, James T. Meeks. Okay. So he doesn't have any, I don't see a PhD next to him or a doctor in front of his name. So maybe he's not seminary trained, but he's a senior pastor in Salem Baptist Church in Chicago.
But I almost didn't use the book of Habakkuk today talking about Dr. King, because Habakkuk has 3 K's in it. Ask the person next to you the question. Ask them, neighbor, what would Dr. King tweet about today?
All right, let me answer. Man, I wish I could be in some of these congregations when they start asking these questions. Oh my Lord, they probably would drown me out, kick me out. But what would Dr. Martin Luther King? Why don't you put in the chat? Let's make this interactive for the 5 or 6 people who are watching. What would Dr. King say today? I'm going to put what I think he would say. Stop killing black babies. That's what he would say today. That's what Dr. King would say. That's what he would tweet. Remember, tweets can't be long. They can only be, unless you're retweeting something, certain amount of characters. Stop killing black babies. That's what Martin Luther King Jr. would say today, or that's what he would tweet today if he were alive.
Amen. Amen. It ain't the Russians that's coming over here locking up black men. You do that. You know that there is a fixation on television today about the Russians and who the Russians are meeting with and who the Russians are planning stuff, and the Russians are trying to steal our elections. What the Russians are not doing is locking up black folks. Schools are a preparatory system.
Yeah, that's right. The Russians are not locking up black people. That's correct. He's correct about that. He is correct about that. All right, so he got one thing right. I was wrong. I thought he got more. I thought he got everything wrong. Yes, Russia is not the enemy of the black people. Yeah.
For a jail. Holy is the Lamb. 70% of all kids suspended today in public schools are black and brown. You mean to
Okay, 70% of kids suspended in school are black and brown. Yes.
tell me it ain't no bad white kids nowhere?
No. No. There are white kids that are bad, yes, but unfortunately the behavioral issues are mostly black, disproportionately African American, and that has nothing to do with the race. The race, principals are not going to schools saying to themselves, I need to look for a reason to get Tyrone in trouble today. They don't want any trouble. They just want to teach. They just want to lead principle, whatever you call it. They don't want to have to fight with children or break up fights. Yes, there are more a disproportionate amount, unfortunately, of African Americans are being suspended because not because they're black, it's because they haven't been taught how to respect authority. It used to be when the principal came into the room or into the classroom, the students were giving the teacher a hard time, everyone would straighten up. And sit all of a sudden now you're sitting in academic posture, your back is as straight as it's ever been. When the principal came in, now one young man took his shirt off to challenge the principal to a fight in the call room, in the classroom, in the hallway rather, outside the classroom. Took his shirt off to challenge the principal, the vice principal, to a fight. And then we had to hold him back, restrain him as he went after the principal. So there's a lack of he was black. I don't see white kids doing this. I'm sorry. When you could show me the videos of white kids attacking teachers, then I'll start to maybe reassess the conclusion I came to on this issue. I don't see it. There is a lack of respect. He doesn't want to admit this. There is a lack of respect in the African community, especially when it comes to young boys and young girls, of authority. Because you haven't taught your children how to respect authority. You taught them that the authority figures, who are mostly white police officers, are racist, the teachers, etc. Therefore, the child now is looking at these leaders who are supposed to be helping him become a man or a woman and teaching them how to interact in society in their middle school, early high school years. You have demonized through media, through your political leaders, you demonize them so that the respect is not there. Not only is the respect not there, but there's a disdain for the authority figures because of you, liberal, because of your actions. Your children, these are your children, sir.
You mean to tell me that white kids don't do anything worthy of suspension? A prisoner who gets out of jail cannot get a job at McDonald's, but that same prisoner in jail is making the uniform for McDonald's workers.
It's called jail, sir, and that's where you go when you commit a crime. When did jail all of a sudden become a bad place? Well, it's a bad place, but a bad place for criminals to go when black people start getting locked up at a disproportionate rate. Now, all of a sudden, we need to shut the prisons down because a lot of black people. Why don't we teach the black community to find ways to be productive so they won't have to resort to criminality? And there'll be less black people in the jails because of that, not because you close all the jails down and put them out on the street to rob and steal from other black people. Why don't we start teaching the youth the value in holding on to their virginity until they're married, as the Bible teaches, which not only will prevent them from coming down with divine punishment, which is sexually transmitted diseases, but also be financially and economically ready or stable. A study was done and it demonstrated that the people who are successful, of these people, a small, very small percentage of them were under the poverty line. They did three things. They graduated high school before they had children, or they graduated high school rather, and they got married before they had children, and they had a job. If you do those three things, studies have shown that you're more likely to be successful or above the poverty line. That's why I'm defining how I'm defining successful here. Above the poverty line. Get married before you have children. Get a job, any job. Stay out of jail. You do those things and you'll be successful in America. Why don't we teach that instead of teaching that the police officers are out to kill you, to whereby you get pulled over for expired tags and you take off now and run from the police because you were taught that the police were going to kill you for going to the store and buying a bag of Skittles or candy.
Is a federal program in our prisons today called Federal Prison Industries. They pay inmates, Salem, 90 cents an hour.
Because according to the 13th Amendment, sir, you are a slave. You can be made a slave or a ward of the state if you are convicted of a crime. So it's not an attack on black people because black people are disproportionately represent inmates. That's not an attack on black people. So let's shut down all the jails and let everyone out because there's too many blacks in jails.
They provide the following services. This is what inmates are making in jail. They're making mattresses, eyeglasses, road signs, and body armor. In 2016, these industries made $500 million.
I doubt a large percentage was from the revenue generated by the inmates, but okay.
You know there is a plan to keep black and brown people in jail. We had hoped to hear white preachers say that the shooting down of Trayvon Martin was wrong.
Oh, the shooting down of Trayvon Martin. Here we go again. Here we go again. All right, Trayvon Martin was killed by a Hispanic man, first of all, not a white man. Oh, he was white Hispanic. He was white Hispanic, Hispanic white. And the Trayvon Martin incident, if you research it, was Trayvon was winning that fight. They had a tussle before any gun was produced. And Trayvon Martin was winning and beating the living daylights out of Zimmerman for following him. Stop following me. Right? Someone tells you to stop following them in the hood. You better stop following them. Okay? Zimmerman kept following, even though he was instructed not to, even by the 911 dispatch worker. He was told to stand down. He kept following. Trayvon Martin realized that he was being harassed and followed and turned around and beat the living crap out of Zimmerman. So much so, he was pounding his head in the cement, and there are pictures, doctors or hospital records that show there's a skull fracture. I think even he was pounding him and grounding and pounding so much so that Zimmerman feared for his life. And that's when he took out his pistol and shot Trayvon. Context is king, but not when you are a liberal. When you are a liberal, headlines are king. Sensation, sophistry, and of course the torture of scripture. That's king. That takes precedent over context or truth.
That shooting Laquan McDonald down in the streets like a dog.
Not familiar with Laquan McDonald, but I'm sure, just like all the rest, probably a justified shooting.
Was wrong. shooting and murdering Eric Gardner.
Eric Gardner wasn't shot. Eric Gardner was choked and he died of I guess he suffocated. He was put into a chokehold by one of the officers who was half his size, and he tried to restrain Sterling by jumping on his back, simultaneously putting him in the chokehold. And that's how they restrained him and took him down. His heart was weak, of course, because of his weight. Is that divine punishment? He was selling Lucy cigarettes, and someone had called 911 because I think he brandished a gun. If I'm not mistaken. So again, another situation in which someone calls 911 and the police respond. Did the police want to be there? Probably not. I can think of 1,000 other places I'd like to be than in John Sterling's neighborhood on the corner with him selling Lucy's. I don't even like standing on the corner. If I'm waiting for my food, and let's say I go to some bodega or something, I'll wait in the store or in the car. I don't even like standing next to some of these guys because not only are the police looking for them, and anything can go down at any point, but other gangbangers and thugs are looking for them. So even Jay-Z, in one of his rhymes, he said NIGGASs won't even stand next to you. The reason why you don't stand next to certain people in the hood is because they have an X on their back. People are looking to kill them, and you can be caught in the crossfire or the exchange. So Sterling was a father. He didn't deserve to die, but that was more of a tragedy than someone targeting him because he was black. Okay. The officer was about 5'0". He he might have been better off calling one of the women to take down Sterling.
Hope to hear white preachers say that shooting Stephon Clark 20 times. You don't have to shoot a dog 20 times. To shoot a kid 20 times that's not armed. Why is it that the white church is not protesting? Why is it that the white pulpit is silent? Why?
All right, I'll tell you why the white pulpit is silent, because they've done their research on the shooting of Stephon Clark. Why didn't you? Because you're a liberal. That's why. Context is not king for you. Emotion is king. The Sacramento Police Department responded to a 911 call. Again, why are the police officers in the black neighborhood? Because they're responding to 911 calls from other black people in that neighborhood. Why are there so many police officers? Over policing is a problem, liberals will say. Why is there over policing in these neighborhoods? Because they're committing crimes at a disproportionate rate in these neighborhoods. So 911 was called. The Sacramento police respond. Individual breaking into car windows. Mr. Stephon Clark was a car thief. He thought by running to his grandmama's house, he was perhaps running into a safe space like he normally did, because they probably protected him. Again, I can guarantee you 100%, 99%, no fathers in the home. And the women in the family protected him, cuddled him, and thus enabled him. Or they were afraid of him. It's either one of the two in my experience. It's either one of the two. All right. So they were looking for the suspect that fit the description. Black man, 6'1", whatever, dark pants, black hooded sweatshirt. These guys don't have any of this information. They do. If they do, they're dishonest by omitting it. They spotted him with a helicopter. That they were looking for him because this person had been. There had been several car break-ins in the neighborhood. So as soon as they got the call, they sent the search helicopter out to finally get this guy that they've been looking for, who's been committing these robberies in the neighborhood. It was Stefan Clark. They spotted him about 9 in the evening in the backyard near a home in the house that had shattered windows. So they caught him red-handed using a tool, might have been a crowbar, to break the window. Officers then instructed Clark to stop and show his hands. Clark then ran. Stefan ran. Then we see police yelling, "Show me your hands, stop, stop, show me your hands." Clark is hopping over gates. He's in his grandmama's backyard, thinking he's safe now. I made it. Home base. You can't touch me now. No, it doesn't work like that, Mr. Clark. So, according to the police, Stefan Clark turned. He was trying to take out his cell phone, probably to call his mama. The police chasing me. I didn't do nothing. He had his cell phone in his hand when he turned. He moved towards the officers and extended the phone in front of himself in a pointing like fashion. So the police officers believed at that point he was brandishing or pointing a gun. And then, fearing for their safety, they fired the 20 rounds, hitting Clark several times. He was shot 8 times, including 6 times in the back. That was also a tragic loss. Another black man involved in crime, a criminal lifestyle, usually lends to police officers finally catching up with you and chasing you down. And at that point, I think the young man should have been wise enough not to take anything out of his pockets, knowing that you were a wanted thief and you had finally been caught. He probably should have stayed on the ground and not tried to do anything. But they mistaken his cell phone. And remember, it's 9:30 in the evening, so it's dark, and you're roaming around backyards. There's dogs. There are he could be hiding somewhere. So you have to look at it from the officer's perspective as well.
Do we have to always be the one to stand up and cry out against injustice? Did you know that so far this year, in 2018, 277 people, not all black, have been killed by the police? Now, I know police got a hard job. I know it's tough on police. But if y'all scared, give up the damn badge.
All right, if you're scared, Slim Jim, give up the badge. So now when a police officer reacts to you calling 911 and your son pulling out a knife, when he reacts with gunfire, he's doing so because he's scared. He shouldn't react that way. He should be brave to take out a knife and engage in a knife fight with your son. And the best knife wielder wins. That would be Slim Jim with the K bar, right? So Slim is Because your son is black, Slim Jim is supposed to take out his K-bar. Your son is rushing him with a knife. He can't shoot because that would mean that he was scared. No, police officers have the authority to use a greater level of force, even deadly force. So if you have a knife, the officer can take out his gun and shoot you. He doesn't have to match your weapon. This isn't this isn't some video game where each of you get your weapons, and if the other person only has a knife, you can only use your knife. Or if he has 12-pound gloves, you have to have 12-pound gloves. No, the officer is authorized to use a greater level of force than what is being used on him. So it doesn't matter if he's unarmed. If the officer deems him to be a threat, he can use lethal force.
If y'all got to shoot everybody every time they roll down a window, you need another job. You don't need to be a police. Something is wrong when.
Can you show me an example of somebody getting shot after they rolled down the window? Probably not.
You are that scared that you're shooting everybody that you run up on, thinking cell phones are guns, lying about it. Something is wrong. Maybe some of y'all need another line of work. I believe that Dr. Martin Luther King would say to the white church tonight, y'all ain't blind. You see the pain of black and brown America. You see the educational system just like we do.
Oh, the educational system that's run by Democrats that you vote for every 2 to 4 years, who have done nothing but take the money that was given to them on a federal level and spend it on new homes, cars. The 3 Baltimore mayors, female black mayors, by the way, former black mayors, indicted all on corruption. So they're taking that money and spending it on themselves, but it's still America's fault that the proficiency rate when it comes to math and reading is what it is. Okay.
You see the economic conditions that we're in just like we do. You see the employment or the lack thereof in the African American community just like we do.
We also see the cause, which is you. So you have become the problem. It's not the white man. The white man is not there. He packed up and left a long time ago. Republicans don't even campaign in certain areas. That's how much of a stronghold they've become for the Democratic Party. Yet you want to blame the white man, mainly Republicans, right? When he's talking about the white man, he's not talking about Joe Biden. He's not talking about Joe Biden.
Stay thirsty, my friends.
He's not talking about Joe when he says the white man. He's talking about conservatives, Republicans, Donald Trump, etc.
Oh! Somebody! Oh! He needs some milk!
He needs some milk.
Love ye one another means you're supposed to love us too.
We love you by telling you the truth. The truth is that the party you support has been the problem. Why don't you try to either create your own party or try another establishment? The one you've been supporting for 50, 60 years has done nothing but exploited you. You're a token for the white liberal. Xenophilic tokenism. That's what the new Supreme Court justice is all about. She's a token. And blacks like this African American here will suggest that the Democratic Party has done something for them because we have a black face on the Supreme Court, a black female face. We already had a black face, but he's not considered black to somebody like this, right? In Clarence Thomas, who was appointed by a Republican. Okay, so we already had a black face on the Supreme Court, but that's what you call tokenism. It's providing the black community with gestures and platitudes, awards, tokens, acknowledgement, accomplishments even. And meanwhile, ignoring the real problems in the black community, which is the breakup of the family, the destruction of the family, and the lack of fathers and the lack of leadership. So we put this on the Supreme Court. Doesn't even know what a woman is. You put a black woman on the Supreme Court who doesn't know what a woman is. That's what white liberals want to see. They want to see black women, black liberals on the Supreme Court who don't even know what a woman is. That's what they want. That's what they would prefer. She probably doesn't know what a man is either. She probably doesn't know what a man is either, because the goal is men are not necessary. Women don't exist and men are not necessary.
Because as we all know, elections matter. And when folks vote, they order what they want, and in this case, they got what they asked for. I went off script a little bit.
You sure did.
And love is not something that you say. Love is something that you do. Don't just preach about the man on the Jericho Road. Come over to the Jericho Road and help those of us who've fallen down in America.
Who's going to help Ben Shapiro?
In terms of the science behind gender dysphoria, you're very familiar with that, Zoe.
Very familiar.
It's not about the the chromosomes within our
both know
nuclei. Yeah, go ahead.
chromosomes don't necessarily mean you're male or female.
Gender.
With gender of course.
Identity. Go ahead. No, so
especially but even so, you have a thing like Klinefelter's syndrome. So you don't know what you're talking about. You're not educated on genetics.
Would you like to discuss the genetics? Or
what
are your genetics?
So I'd stay away from the genetics and back to the brain scans.
You cut that out now, or you'll go home in an ambulance.
Yeah, that seems mildly inappropriate for a political discussion.
See, I love the way Shapiro's response. Like, you don't stand a chance against that guy. Like Shapiro probably is pretty good at talking his way out of conflict based on his I don't know his early childhood, but he just seems like that kid that was just really good at talking his way out of getting beat up. So he's good. He's really good when it comes to bullies like that and how to deal with them. Yeah. I don't know what, I think he said he was suing or he was going to take her to court or him to court, whatever. I don't know whatever happened to that, but that was a threat, against Shapiro, the little man Shapiro, against his life. And, we need to take these threats from these liberals seriously because they are very dangerous people. This is the same spirit of Ashra and Balaam and Baal and all the destruction they were causing back in ancient times. They've now sophisticated their attack on God. They have even managed to convince, just like it was in the days of Noah, the majority of people that their ideas are natural, normal, and healthy. Um, Dumb comment of the week. And not only is this the dumb comment of the week, it's from Rachel Mad Cow here, but it was retweeted. See, I have that circle there. 1,451, it looks like, retweets. 1,000 over 1 point or 1,500 retweets. That's how many dumb retweets there are. Retweeting Rachel Maddow's comment here on the Putin Ukraine situation. One difference, she says, this is Rachel Mad Cow on Twitter. One difference between Putin and Hitler is that Hitler didn't kill ethnic Germans, German-speaking people. Putin slaughters the very people he said he has come to liberate. 1,451 stupid tweets retweeted that. 1,451. 5,306 quote tweets. What's the difference between a quote tweet and a retweet? I don't know. And 3,660 likes. Then she comes, then we get from the Auschwitz Memorial, one of the more famous concentration camps. I think there's a museum you can go visit, I believe. They responded. On a factual note, Hitler did kill ethnic Germans and German-speaking people. Those who opposed the Nazi regime, those who resisted, like some Christian groups, those who did not fit into the Weltanschauung. I have no idea what that means. He ordered the murder of people with different disabilities, and then also, finally, the murder of German Jews. And then Richard Mad Cow, retweets. I do give her credit. She does retweet and corrected herself, her error, her dumb comment. Dumb comment of the week. The historical record is clear. Hitler killed millions of Germans. Retweeted out part of an inaccurate statement. Part of an accurate statement made last night by former Ambassador Michael McFaul without attribution, and we regret doing so. We have since removed the tweet. Dumb comment of the week. Tweety. All right. I'm going to get out of here. I'm having too much fun. I hope I triggered you if you're a liberal. And I hope you were blessed if you are a saint. So if you are a believer, have a great day. Enjoy the rest of your week. And if you are not a believer, have a bad day. Have a bad day and have a horrible week. And hopefully that will bring you to repentance. That'll bring you to repentance. Next week, we're going to be talking about the essentials of the faith. And I'm borrowing from Hank Hanegraaff, his memorable keys to doctrine, the essentials of the Christian faith, where he gives us essentials, the essentials of our faith. Some have 18 essentials, I think. Hank breaks it down, or he limits it to just the letters of the word doctrine. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 essentials. All right. But there are some people that have more. Is that a bad thing? No, not necessarily. Because sometimes you can condense some of the essentials into even less than 8. You might be able to combine the divinity and also the Trinity, D and the T. You can probably combine that into one essential. Okay. Norman Geisler has 16 essentials. He wrote a book on 16 essentials. So I'll be presenting a condensed version of 8 using the acronym doctrine. So even though most Christians would argue that in essentials unity, in non-essentials liberty, in all things charity, that being the case, what exactly are the essentials of the Christian faith, and why are these doctrines essential or important? Why are they important? To whereby we would call them essential. So the essentials of the Christian faith are rooted and grounded in the apostles' doctrine, which is what we discussed a few weeks ago, or the teachings of the apostles, the teachings the martyrs shed their blood for. So that's what I'll be discussing next week. I hope you can join me then. Until then, repent of dialogue.
If you reject Christ, then the moment you take your first step through the gates of hell, the only thing you will hear is all of creation standing to its feet and applauding and praising God because God has rid the earth of you.
I take full responsibility for my going to hell.